We decide for somebody else that they are better than or lesser than based on something entirely out of their control, because we're so afraid of our lack of belonging that we need to solidify that we belong by putting somebody else down.
Hi, I'm Angelique Letizia, a writer, director, and creator of the Call Cut Method. It's a tool to shift your frequency, rewrite your inner script, and realign you with the energy of your highest potential. This podcast is your behind-the-scenes pass to alchemizing that energy. So if you're ready to interrupt the script, reclaim your power, and write your story that you were actually born to live, you're in the right place. My guest today is Alexandra Miles, the founder and CEO of Project Blackbird, Inc., a movement born from her decision to turn pain into power. After battling an eating disorder, Alexandra could have stayed silent. Instead, she used her own story as a spark, creating a platform that brings real, unfiltered conversations about the stigma regarding mental health to youth and underrepresented communities. Through Project Blackbird, she tours high schools and colleges, pairing powerful short film screenings with panels of athletes, actors, and public figures sharing their lived experiences. She connects audiences with free therapy and mental health resources. She is living proof that pain, when faced with courage, can become power, and that one voice spoken without apology can heal hearts and minds throughout the world. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Call Cut with Angelique. I'm Angelique, and today I have an amazing guest. I am so happy to have my dear friend Alexandra Miles, actress, filmmaker, and founder of Project Blackbird, Inc. Welcome to the show, Alexandra. I am so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Angelique. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so glad for the platform that you provide to speak about this. It's amazing.
Oh, God, we have so much to talk about, and I cannot wait to get into this. First of all, you know how much I admire the work that you're doing in the mental health space. And we came together on this anxiety, panic, depression plane. So I would love for you to just get right in and start to talk to our audience a little bit about you, what you do, and how you got here.
As you mentioned, I wear a couple of different hats. I originally was solely an actor. I was acting and then started filmmaking as well as a producer. Um, the nonprofit came a little bit later and actually stemmed from my struggle with mental health, and then combining that with my filmmaking and acting. I When I was an actor full time, I was living in Los Angeles. I was diagnosed there with an eating disorder that ironically I didn't even know that I had. I went in to seek help and treatment because I couldn't stop thinking about food and planning my meals. It became the center of my world. I was leaving social events early. I remember having these thoughts, transparently. I mean, I would have thoughts at night. I was hungry and I would say, just go to sleep, just go to sleep. You could have something in the morning. And I didn't know that I was doing anything wrong because of so much. I mean, there was so much messaging that I was hearing and trying to fit in and thinking that that was what was normal. Anyways, long story short, ended up in a treatment center. From that treatment center, I met a young woman who I connected with very deeply, but we came from very different worlds, very different backgrounds. We presented very differently. I was very outspoken. She was very quiet, hardly spoke to anybody. We connected very deeply, left treatment. This is all back in 2018, 2018. So fast forward, I ended up making a film about the two of us, but it was a narrative film, not a documentary, just a film to share what this experience is like behind treatment walls. Eating disorder, but treatment in general, mental health, just a story of these two individuals that meet and the story of the others that live in this treatment center. And after I created that film, realizing that it had the power to do more than just be viewed, that I could actually use the film to connect and make impact. That's what started the nonprofit Project Blackbird, which uses the film, and I can share a little bit more. It uses the film as a platform to provide for different college students, high school students, and other community members. Uses the film as a platform to get real around mental health, to spread awareness around mental health. We have the film, we have celebrities, athletes, role models speaking about their mental health struggle. And we use all of that as a platform to then provide free therapy and a resource fair to help other individuals realize that it might not be okay to struggle. I don't like that phrase. I don't like it's okay to struggle. It's not okay to struggle, but it's okay to struggle and ask for help. It's okay to admit that you're struggling and say, I need help and let's find a way to feel better, to feel happy, to feel fulfilled, to live again.
I absolutely love that. And I love what you say about struggle because there is some sort of stigma around this idea that we all have to struggle.
Hmm.
The idea of having a positive constitution, I'm not going to say positive thinking, et cetera, because it's not realistic that every moment of every day we're going to have positive thoughts,
Right.
right? We're going to go in a wave. But to have a positive constitution helps you deal with the struggle in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like the work that you're doing opens up these doors for people to see things differently because everything is perception. We get locked into these boxes. And I'd love for you, if you feel comfortable, to talk a little bit about your struggle with this eating disorder because it's a mental game.
Yeah,
And I would love if you feel comfortable sharing a little bit with our
absolutely.
audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say one thing that I like to kind of demystify for everybody now is that an eating disorder really doesn't look like what we read about in a textbook growing up. Like I said, I knew that I was struggling. I took myself into treatment, but I had no idea that I had an eating disorder. Personally, mine didn't look like, again, what I read about. I was eating 3 meals a day. I was eating everything. I just was I was very regimented about how much I was eating and sometimes the type of food I was eating. But it really, I had so many rules in my head. I would get a burger and a cupcake, but I was only allowed to eat half the burger and half the cupcake. Now, for some, that might genuinely be part of what is healthy for them, but I wasn't listening to my own body. I was hungry and I was stopping myself because I looked around me and I saw, well, so and so, they ate a salad for lunch and that was it. And I was eating 2 sandwiches for lunch because that's what my body wanted and needed. And so I think for me, it became a constant comparison. I was looking at others for the answer, but they're looking at others for the answer too. We're all looking at somebody else for the answer when we all have different needs. We're all completely different bodies. And so I think that that's what started my mindset of comparison. But I think it was compounded because I had this deep, deep desire to fit in and be liked. And I was living in a world out there where I showed up automatically assuming that I was going to be rejected. And I've kind of had this mindset, to be honest, since childhood. And I think that's what I realized is since I was a little girl, it was constantly, I'm not enough or I'm too much. And in every world that I stepped in, it was this imposter syndrome of they're going to find out that I don't actually belong. So, how do I show them that I do? I think that in addition to some traumas along the way, honestly, I think some traumas kind of pulled out this habit and this way of thinking, this thought pattern that I have. I think it heightened it and then turned into what ended up being this eating disorder. And now it's very difficult for me to just because those habits are so real. I have in my mind now all of these concepts and messaging around food. Now, I do not struggle in the way that I used to. I eat anything and everything, allergies aside, but I don't restrict any kind of food groups. I don't hold back to my hunger, but I do see the same thought patterns manifest in terms of this deep feeling of needing to be belonging and accepted. And so I have to continue to work on that because otherwise it comes out in different areas. And so oftentimes you'll see somebody struggle with an eating disorder and then that might end up being helped so to you might deal with the eating disorder behaviors, but then all of a sudden that might manifest in addiction in a different way, alcohol addiction or whatever it might be, but you see it manifest in different ways because what's underlying is still a struggle and is still a problem. And I'm happy to go into any detail about anything. I want to be as honest about this as possible because I think so many people have these thoughts. We just don't speak about them.
I love everything that you're speaking about right now. I want to hone in on a couple of things that you said. So, one, you talked about not feeling like you belonged and feeling as though you would walk into a room and people wouldn't accept you. And that's a real deep unworthiness trauma wound, right? And I completely relate to that wound. I will also say that many people relate to that wound. And this is why what you said at the end was so brilliant that even if you were able to cure the behaviors, you weren't able to stop the loop. And that's what it ultimately is because it's a story. And that story continues to play out. We don't realize that these stories actually run our lives. We get help here, we take a course, we do all of these things to try and help ourselves. And temporarily they do put a band-aid, but the subconscious mind is never penetrated. The subconscious mind isn't fixed and that story isn't fixed. So, my question to you is, as you move through now and you're doing your work and you see things like social media, certain celebrities, Ozempic, all of these trends that are coming out and that, let's be honest, are incredibly toxic. There are celebrities that I legit feel are toxic. They have dysmorphia.
Yeah.
They are projecting that dysmorphia onto the public and they have massive platforms. And while we can all agree that who the hell wants to look old or heavy or whatever, we all have different bodies and different
Yeah.
shapes. And if the consciousness changes to accept each other how we are, instead of try to push everybody into a box, then the pathway to healing is a lot easier for
Yeah.
people.
100%. I have so many thoughts on that. And you nailed it with that concept. That at large is what I aim to do with Project Blackbird and one of the reasons why we do have public figures get involved. But first I'll say it's incredibly frustrating to me that we continue to create ridiculous and unachievable expectations of normalcy. So we have this new standard that we're forcing everybody to meet in terms of beauty and beauty, weight, all of this, creating a false sense of normalcy, essentially, that now everybody feels the need to meet when, like you said, if we could all embrace actually humanity and part of the beauty of aging and part of the beauty of what is natural, our natural bodies. We're human, but it's just becoming something so large, and so powerful that we don't know what to do with it anymore as individuals when we see these celebrities looking a certain way, doing so much to their body, to their looks. That to me is incredibly frustrating, but it's also really difficult. I engage with a lot of public figures who sometimes will also be honest with me about what they struggle with, but not ready to share with the community. And I respect that. I cannot, I absolutely hold those boundaries for them and with them. At the same time, it's really sad to me because what they're presenting then is a false sense of reality. And I think what they don't realize is even though that's not meant to hurt, it is hurting so many individuals. I've been on the other side of it. I have looked up to somebody, a celebrity that was hurting. And ironically, that individual is the reason that I was able to heal too. They're incredibly inspirational and they were a part of my recovery because they acknowledged it and they realized it. But I know how real it is because that also when they were struggling and didn't realize that they were struggling, that's what led me down a bad path too because I looked up to that. Not that it was their fault, and not at all. It was, based on my own experience, but we learn a lot from our role models and we are a comparison culture and we look up to our role models. So it gets very complicated, but then for a public figure to realize their ability and their unique power to influence and change in a positive way, their unique ability to actually pull back that curtain and be quite honest and authentic and real and allow so many individuals to do the same. And I have seen this firsthand as we bring around Project Blackbird on tour, whether it's with actors or we've had a lot of NFL players speaking about their mental health struggle, NFL players speaking about having an eating disorder. You really don't hear a lot of men speak specifically about eating disorders, but for anybody listening, I will tell you, out of the events that we do, the individuals that speak with me in the back of the room about eating disorders more often than not are men. And they're saying, I've never spoken about this. I don't know what to do about it. I don't hear anyone talking about it. But so much of what you said, I relate to. And that's what they'll say. And I think that's a large population that is yet to be understood and explored in the scope of eating disorders. But when you think about how many of us have male friends who might be, and this is a generalization, but I have a lot of male friends who really feel that the way their bodies are shaped is directly linked to their work. So counting macros, going to the gym, looking a certain way, eating certain foods. You see it present exactly in every population. It just sometimes it manifests differently, sometimes it's understood differently, but it's experienced amongst everyone.
I love that you brought this up about men. There is a common misconception that men are not impacted in the same way as women. And that's just not true. They absolutely are impacted in the same way. Being a celebrity has got to be incredibly difficult. You are married to a public persona, and that public persona is not necessarily owned by you, right? And so you're constantly keeping up with, I say, the Joneses, but you're keeping up with something you can't even keep up with, right? And an image. There's this sort of false sense of everything that comes along with that. And so I love that you highlighted that even for them to get to a point to say, I need help. I'm going down a really dark path right now and I can't find my way out. And you're right. The one part of it though is when you are in the public eye, you do have a responsibility to the public. And that's an energetic exchange more than anything else because what you put out is being absorbed. And so we do have to be conscious of what we're saying and what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah. And I mean, and I would say to all of the public figures that are not necessarily part of the youth population, the youth and our next generation, they actually very much value authenticity. So the feedback when being authentic is incredibly positive. And I think also the power of in and I don't want to say older, I mean the power of an adult celebrity, celebrity type or personality, public figure. An adult public figure being honest can help shape the next generation of celebrity public figure, the teen actors out there, to allow them to actually start out being authentic. Because if you start that way, I don't think, I think that helps a lot with being able to continue to be authentic. I think it's much more difficult when you begin your persona, your relationship, if you will, with the general population and with fame. If you begin that relationship with a facade, if you begin that relationship with this needed image of perfection, it's that much harder to then pull that mask away. But if you can just shape your relationship with society as you become more in the public eye in an authentic way, there's nothing to pull back. They get to know you in this authentic way. And so I think there's so much power also as someone who is an adult, who is older, as a public figure, to show the youth that are now coming up in that light, in that spotlight, you can be yourself as you come up in that spotlight, and I think we can start to shift the next generation of celebrity and public figures. And because I think a lot of celebrities that come into the spotlight, they're not asking necessarily for that responsibility. But unfortunately, that's what they're given when they step into that role.
It's true. And it's been that way for decades. And I love this conversation because people don't realize that mental health issues go deep. They start from childhood trauma, and then they're compounded by societal trauma. And then they're compounded by, I call it experiential trauma, where you have gone through life and you kind of find yourself in the perfect storm. I've been there, you've been there, millions of people have been there. And the question becomes, how do you heal a society that's broken? And the brokenness of it is this idea that people on an incredibly deep level do not feel like they're valued. And it doesn't matter how much money they have, what the spotlight they have, the status they have. They inherently feel they are never enough. They're
Yeah.
not truly seen.
That's it. Seen.
Yeah.
I think I always think of that word. I think no matter who you are and how selfless you want to be, at the end of the day, we're human, and every human came from every human was a child, and every child, the child in us needs to be seen, really seen and understood. And I think a lot of times when, as a child, you don't feel that you were seen and understood, I think that need is even greater as you become an adult because it wasn't given. I still think every adult still wants, no matter what, wants to feel seen and understood. Also, I think that's a human quality. And yeah, I think you nailed it. with the word seen.
And there's something, and this is such a broad thing, but because you deal in the mental health space, there are so many facets of it. And even the idea of cyberbullying.
Yeah.
And we look at the suicide rate of children going up. I know in the town of Greenwich, it went up 60%, which is a huge, huge jump. And when you talk to these kids, it's twofold. It's trying to please parents and this sort of academia expectation, I would say. And then also what they see online and how they're constantly trying to keep up with that. Botox for a 16-year-old is ridiculous. I'm going to be 46 in a week and I do not do Botox and I do not do fillers. I get accused of it constantly, but I don't do it. And I'm like, man, for all the crap I get for it, I
Yep.
might as well be like,
Yeah.
hold my face all the way back. But for a child, that is so traumatizing because you're telling this child who, I mean, I don't know, when I was 16, I certainly wasn't thinking about
No.
any of
No.
that.
Yeah.
I had those teen magazines and I do remember looking at the women and thinking, wow, I wish I looked like that because they were unbelievably beautiful, right? And, you look at yourself and you're like, "Oh, my hair. Oh god, my
Comparison
nose."
culture. That's us. We are.
And before you know it, you start to develop this ridiculous insecurity around the way you look.
Yeah.
That's what mine was more physical, not with the eating disorder, it was my face. I had this obsession that I had to fix it, change it. And, I had my nose done. I had it done the second time when the first time collapsed. And no matter what, I'm still not happy. Now I got a Quasimodo eye, it's like I got to pick this girl up. But
Which nobody in the world would have any idea or notice, but we see in our,
we see all these things, uneven lip, this, that. And the reason I point these things out is to say, I'm not running out to go do anything about it because at some point we got to call cut on this idea that we are going
yeah.
to be perfect. There's this weird thing, and I don't know if you felt this in your journey. But the more I studied energy work was the more you push toward youth, maintaining weight, you get an equal and opposite force pushing back, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
physics. You're also, your subconscious, and I know this is wild, but your subconscious is saying, I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm gonna age. I'm old. So the reason it's like chasing something you're never gonna get is because no matter what you do to yourself, momentarily you could look fantastic. But the subconscious keeps saying, we have to maintain this. We have to
It's
keep
so
because
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
We're gonna get old. So your own mind, in a weird way, is working against you. That's why we need to call cut on these toxic mindsets that all women should be 20 forever. I do not want to be 20 again.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. You bring up a good point about just the energy of kind of going against and the tension there. It's also even a mindset of, and I think you feel this a lot in the eating disorder community. It's, I'm going to do this to my body. I'm going to make my body look this way. I'm going to make my face look this way. I'm going to do this to myself versus my body and I are going to do this together. We're going to feel good together. We're going to, and I'm not talking even like shaping, but just actually, we're going to grow old together. We're going to enjoy and be peaceful together. We're going to be happy together. Having having this actual love and relationship with your body, doing it as a team, not doing it against and call cut, going back to call cut. For me, calling cut on perfection means also being able to live because I realized at some point in time, yes, I can. Yes, at this point, I have proven to myself I can look any way I want. I can control as much as I want. I can do X, Y, Z, but at what cost? Because I'm miserable. I'm not actually enjoying any single moment. I'm constantly thinking of the future. At some point, I'm gonna die. It's inevitable. I mean, that is something that will happen to everyone. And at those last moments, do I really wanna sit there and say, "Well, thank goodness I spent every single second of my life trying to look like I was 27. But what I love to just revel in the wonderful memories and connections that I had, what I love to sit there with my family and friends that actually love the way that I made them feel being around them, that love me and hold their hand and just smile. Yes, that's what I want. Somebody else might have a different answer. Someone else might have a different want, but I have to say for myself, what is my secret to happiness? And I can sit there and see everyone on a keto diet. I can see everyone working out and loving working out in different ways. I can see everybody doing what they need to do to reach what in their mind might be happiness. But at the end of the day, I have to stop comparing because their happiness is not mine. And I'm living in someone else's world. And I have not really had much of a chance to even enjoy or live in mine. So call cut on perfection.
Wow. Well done. I for you choke me up every time you talk because that whole piece where you talked about working with your body and growing old together. See, I'm going to start again. That's the piece that's missing. It's the soul part. It's the spirit part. What makes someone beautiful is not what they look like. You could bring a physically incredibly beautiful, and by the way, I've been in this situation before, right? You bring an unbelievably beautiful person into the room, and the minute they speak, you're like, okay. Then you bring somebody in who's just magnetic and kind, and the way they speak to people and the way they see the world. And man, do they become the most beautiful person in the world.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And when you see that in real time, you realize everything else is just an illusion. If we spent more time on what you talked about, which I say is heart led beauty, which is where we go after the things that make us happy, where we treat people with kindness, where we make the world a more beautiful place, your inner beauty will radiate on a level that is incomprehensible. You can walk out, no makeup, no this, no that, no, and people will stop you on the street and be like, wow, I wish people understood that power.
You're incredible too. And you have such a brilliant understanding of this and concept. I mean, you lead this. You just have a beautiful mindset and perspective on life and this world, and it shows. And anyways,
Thank
sorry to interrupt
you.
your I mean, it really
No, no, thank you. And, so do you. And I think that's what makes this connection. This is why I really wanted to have a conversation with you because it's not easy for people to navigate these waters. It really
yeah.
isn't. People of all different ages, I'm Gen X. I think you're a little younger, a lot younger, actually.
I'm a millennial. I'm in my 30s.
Yeah, I was like, a
But
lot.
millennials span, I just found out millennials are right now, what I think a millennial is up to maybe like 4, I don't know, but in their, so there's a big span. I have no idea what year anybody is anymore, but
Neither do I. I just know
we're
that
we're all blending together.
I was born in the latter 70s. So I'm in that group
And
that,
we should all embrace it. Honestly, it's again, age is an amazing thing.
yeah, and we don't all get here. And, you
Yeah,
know, I had my stepsister was killed by a drunk driver when I was at 12 and she was in her 20s. And something that has always stopped me when I start to spiral is the thought that she never got here,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there are tons of people that won't get here. It's not fun to watch your whole face start to shrink in and move in. And, there are ways to prevent that, of course, massage and tension and all these things. But it is a gift. It's a gift. And when we stop ourselves and think, wow, I was gifted this time. I was allowed to stay here. My life wasn't cut short. I I've learned things, I've experienced things, and no, not all of it's fun, but all of it leads to something else. And that brings me to something that you wrote about starting out as the actress filmmaker. And I can also relate to this and realizing that there was another path that was opening up for you. Let's go. Tell me about this moment.
I actually, growing up, would hear all the time as an actor, and I before I was a film actor, I did a lot of work with Meisner, stage acting, musical theater, and I would always hear, "If there's anything else in this world that you love, do it because it's not glamorous to be an actor." This is and it's true. It is hard work. I mean, beyond, and you have to have so much tenacity and hustle, and you have to have a lot of strength and a sense of who you are because you hear it, you try and you try and you try and you could hear no from 15 to 90 years old, and then but you have to just really love it. Honestly, you have to really love it. And then, as you mentioned, for me there was this moment. I didn't think there was anything else that I really loved as much, but honestly, it was I was going to grad school and I had created this short film, and then I started to shape this organization, and for the first time in so long, I had energy and excitement and motivation, and I was waking up every day feeling fulfilled and something um very visceral that is hard to explain, but I had butterflies in my stomach again. I felt something outside of myself. I was seeing people again. I was seeing others again. And I think that's something that's really important too is not selfishly in a bad way, but selfishly it does something to you when you start to look at others. When you stop becoming so in your own mind and so self-focused and self-oriented, and when you actually start to see others, I I felt passion, honestly, and it felt good. And so I did call cut on this prior life, and it wasn't giving up acting, it wasn't giving up um, filmmaking, but it was enough holding on to what I thought was going to make me happy. Why am I looking towards the future? Why am I holding on to the past? Why am I not listening? And the second I was just able to listen and let my in-person brain tell me what it wanted, the second that I was able to lean on that, the path started to form. I didn't have to control much. It just happened. And I think our minds are so powerful. We're constantly in our own way. And if we just stop trying to control everything and let it happen, there's a lot of magic that can unfold. And so that was kind of my call cut moment career wise too. And I still lean into that. The organization and those that work with me, I think, could tell you the same thing. The organization changes almost daily. I am constantly asking, I'm constantly listening. I know what I want to achieve. I feel it intuitively, also what I think will work and what won't. But I will never again remain incumbent because I don't think there's any power in doing so. And I think if we want to make a difference in this world, we have to listen.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Something, hold on, I got to scratch my face. Unbelievable. This hair, God, everything just starts doing its own thing. Um, but I love when you talk about you didn't actually leave it behind, but you integrated it. That's
Mm,
alignment.
yeah,
Because if we really look at our lives, nothing, absolutely nothing that's happened to us is for no reason. Every little piece leads you to exactly where you are meant to be. You may not get there at 25, but you're going to get there. And you may need more wisdom along the way. You may need more experience. Not everything is so cut and dry. I know if I were trying to do the things that I'm doing now in my 20s, nobody would be paying attention to it. I didn't have the wisdom. I hadn't yet married intellect and intuition, which is what I believe wisdom is.
yeah. Oh, I love that. You're
Right.
right. Yes.
When they come together, they form this incredible union that opens you up to something far beyond what we can perceive in this realm. The other thing that you said that I love is that it's constantly evolving and changing. Yes, because as everything moves in the universe, nothing stays still. We are always in flux and transformation. That's why there's no such thing as absolute truth, right?
Yeah.
But there's truth in everything. And so you would have to keep shapeshifting and evolving to meet certain needs and meet certain dynamics that have changed.
Yeah.
And right, instead
Yeah.
of saying so structured, because the more information becomes available to us, the more we understand things differently.
100%. And going back to what you said too about honestly maintenance. It's the same concept. It's instead of trying to, keep up this tension of maintenance, go with it. Just listen, flow with it, change. The only constant is change. So embrace it instead of trying to fight it.
Yes, and the whole idea of what you said was going with the flow. That's surrender. So many people push and, physics, anything that you push with all of your might, you get an equal and opposite force as a reaction. So letting go and just being like, okay. And this is not to say that you don't put action, because in the third dimension, you do need action, which is energy. So you do need your energy behind it, but it needs to be focused energy. And that's what you're doing. You're taking this beautiful mission and you're taking your pain and you're transforming it into power for others. And what a beautiful thing to do, because there are so many people in this world who will hear your story and say, oh my God, that's me. And if she could do it, I can do it.
Speaking of somebody saying that's me or connecting, I just had a meeting yesterday, and a colleague of mine that had watched the film that inspired the program, that starts off the program. She actually said the first thing that I noticed when I started to learn about your nonprofit, I saw the trailer for this film and I looked at this woman and I said, "That's me." And that was and I told her that is exactly why I started this organization, and that's why we created the film, was to show somebody themselves, whether it was the lead in that film, whether it was a panelist on stage. It's that connection, it's going back to feeling seen, but seeing that we're genuinely not alone, and connection. I think connection is the most important concept out of all of this. It's not just connection with ourselves. That's important too. And I think for a while, for many years, maybe this was, I want to say 10 years ago, you started hearing this a lot. Self care. How do you connect with yourself? Connect with yourself. And you still hear it. But I think what we've lost is the importance of connection with others also. And I could go down a rabbit hole of this. I think there's of course a lot to be said for the pandemic, but I think it's beyond that. I think for years, even before that, we were losing connection with others. The ironic thing about that is that we were gaining the ability to connect with others through social media. So we're becoming this global force when it comes to being able to connect with other countries, other cultures. Our youth are now day to day interacting with someone that they never would have before. But somehow it's also making us become further disconnected. And I also think it's increasing your need to compare to now not only your own village, but to every village in this world. So comparison culture has gone up. I mean,
No,
I
this
could go
is,
down this rabbit hole, but
no, I like this because this is the stuff people need to hear. People need to hear that, yes, we are connected, but we lack connection. Two
hmm
different things. Yeah, sure. Social media can do a lot of wonderful things, but it's unfortunately dancing on the negative side of the polarity spectrum. It
yeah,
hasn't fully realized its potential for the good, right? It's moving there,
agreed.
but there's
Yeah.
quite a number of toxic traits. You know, even filters, I'm guilty of it. Everyone's guilty of, you want to look good where you are, right?
Yeah.
So people are constantly changing their appearance and putting out their best foot forward. And why shouldn't you, right? You're going to be in the public eye. People have been doing that for years. But when people are altering their faces, removing their face and putting somebody else's face, you're like, whoa. Things have go from, okay, I understand it, to that is toxic. And we need to be super careful with that.
100%.
And then,
Yeah.
kids. My concern is always kids, because I think of myself, and when you do not have the power to understand what that is. And this is where I feel like Project Blackbird does a great job, and what you're actually doing and trying to bring awareness, because you go to schools and you speak everywhere and you have these events and you do bring awareness. When you have that level of visibility for people and people know there's a place they can go to understand, no, this is not reality.
Yeah.
This is cyberspace. This is
Mhm.
an alternate reality, VR, whatever you want to call it.
Yes. It's a highlight reel for a lot of people too. It's not, we're not putting out there the bad and the ugly sometimes. We're just putting our highlight reel.
Yeah. And what I also, and I know this is crazy, but there are people who love to say, oh, I'm real, I'm real. And they start to criticize others. The whole thing is toxic,
Yeah.
right? The whole thing. This I'm better than you superiority complex, that's the
Oh,
issue,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. And we see that actually. Oh my gosh. Yes. We see it time and again and in different ways also. And I'll just say really quickly, the book casts the origins of our discontent, shows even in history why humans, human nature, we will decide for someone else, for another subgroup or culture, or whatever it is. We create subgroups, I should say. We decide for somebody else that they are better than or lesser than based on something entirely out of their control, because we're so afraid of our lack of belonging that we need to solidify that we belong by putting somebody else down or up or wherever it is. We need to know our place.
Brilliantly said. That's 100% just as much an issue. And it does contribute to the same mental health problems because superiority complexes where you are, yep, the word is eluding me. There it is, where you're excluding someone in order to show superiority, or you're making fun of whatever they're
Yeah.
doing, or you're mocking them because you want to somehow show that your way is better. That is the same. You're actually on the same side of the polarity spectrum. You haven't moved. And it's a false light projection. It's really interesting. And I see people do it all the time where they're like, I do this and I do that. That's a false light projection. And that is just as dangerous because
Yeah.
it's now all those people who are behaving that way or using those things, they're falling into different categories. Well, I know we can chat about this all day, every day, but we are coming to the end. But yes, so tell us a little bit about what's ahead for Project Blackbird and what you have coming up in 2026.
2026 is going to be a really, really exciting year for the organization, some of which I will have to share shortly because we're not quite allowed to speak about every partnership that is about to launch and unveil. But we have a huge school initiative that's coming up, a huge faith based initiative for many of the faith based institutions. We are starting to enter. We are starting to enter some prisons, some of that space to address different juvenile detention centers and help the youth in that space. We are going to be presenting upcoming at the UN. We'll be at South by Southwest as well, Sundance. So we have our kind of festival run coming up. But really, as an organization, we have a lot of wonderful, wonderful supporters coming to the table, whether it's different public figures that are joining. We're doing a lot in the athlete space with athletic departments. So building out support there and specific needs of athletes. There's so much happening in this new year, and I'm really, really excited to just be doing this with incredible partners, other resources, other nonprofits, other companies even and brands that really care about this. All of a sudden it's not becoming just throwing money into it. It's actually making change together. Now we're working with legislators. We're doing this together as a real partnership, and I don't feel alone. So I'm really excited for what's to come this next year and the amount of students that we'll actually be able to truly connect with and build community around.
Well, Alexandra, you are doing a lot to change the world. You are one of those people who puts your action behind your words, and you have, as I said before, taken your pain and made it into power. And just you are proving that one person can affect change. And that is a huge kudos to you. So we are so excited to follow your journey and, let us know where people can follow you. I know you're on LinkedIn, you're on Facebook, and we'll throw up the Project Blackbird website so people can get involved. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for being on the show. I was so happy to hear your story and for sharing your heart with us.
Thank you so much for having me and for everything that you do for this world. Talk about one person can make a change and a difference. You're looking at her right now, Miss Angelique.
Thank you. It's a we game. Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angelique. New episodes drop every Friday. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. And remember, folks, no matter what life gives you, you must always keep shining.